we're going to be talking about employment documents. Now, what is employment documents? Well, there are employment contracts, policies and procedures, confidentiality agreements, some sort of deed. It could be contractors' agreements in relation to the employment. It could be agreements to take long service leave early, or cashing out holiday pay, or personal leave. It could be some sort of agreement about going on a sabbatical or having a secondment. So employment documents essentially are everything that your employee will have and interact with you as an employer. What documents are important to get right? It's a really big question. Okay, so first of all, it's probably a good idea to get those employment contracts right. And if you don't have employment contracts, fine, but if you do have them, get them right. I can't tell you how many times an employer has called me and said, hey, look, this person's left without giving me any notice. Can I deduct the notice period off the salaries? Well, they haven't got an employment contract that says that sort of deduction is okay. No, not really. You can't deduct all of it, and only if you are going to deduct, only as far as the award or your enterprise agreement allows. Or an employer's called me up and they've said, I've just found out my employee is moonlighting somewhere. Surely that's a breach of the employment contract. Maybe, maybe not. Get that employment contract right first. Okay, another employment contract to get really right is some of those policies and procedures. Make sure they're up to date. Make sure they actually mean something to you and the business. Don't just have a policy for the sake of having a policy. Have a policy that means something, because once you've got a policy that means something, you can then filter that down and get it right from the very top right down to the very bottom. If you've got, for instance, a no smoking policy, and it says no smoking in the workplace, easy peasy. What about outside the workplace? Okay, no smoking within 5 meters of a workplace. Okay, well that's part of the law, but it's not necessarily a policy. Oh, you might say no smoking in the workplace and you must comply with all laws. Well, what are those laws? So look, I think it's probably a good idea to get it really simple. Don't have policies that are cajillions of pages long. Make sure your employees are going to read them. Make sure you've got documentation that they've read them, and make them relevant. I think that's really important. Other employment documents to get right, pay slips. Don't get those wrong. You've got penalties attached to getting your pay slips wrong. Don't do it. Make sure if you're going to get any written agreements about how people are cashing out their annual leave, get that right. Because if you don't get that right, you might find yourself being sued and having penalties attached. How do I know which employment documents I need? Well, I guess in many ways you've got to think about what your business is, what you want, and what you want your employees to know. So, for instance, you might want your employees to know that your confidential information is super important to you. So, have a confidentiality clause in your employment contract or a deed, confidentiality deed. It might be that what's really important to you is all your employees complying with social media requirements. Get a policy in place. Prescribe the social media requirements. Maybe it's really important for you that your employees dress in a particular way. Get that in a policy. That's an important document to you. It's not the same for every employer. So what's good for you is not good for me, it's not good for these guys. So stop and think about what you want to achieve, and get someone like us to help you build that strategy so you only need to have the documents that you need. And if there's a bit of gravy on top and you have a few documents that are great to have but not necessarily need to have, then there's no problem there, but at least you've got the ones you absolutely need. What we need to advise our employee some issues we've been noticing around the workplace. What letters should we present them regarding this? Okay, so when we're talking about issues around the workplace, we're probably talking about conduct or performance. Look, the first thing you need to do is you need to stop and think about what they're doing and what conduct and performance you need to tell them about. So get it really particularised. The next thing you need to do is notify them. Yes, you absolutely should be putting it together in a letter form, as well as verbalisation. I hear a lot of people telling me, oh look, I told my employee about 10 times that they needed to get it right. Did you ever tell them if they didn't, they would be terminated? Probably not such an easy thing to say. So we encourage to back everything up in writing. All lawyers want things in writing, and we're certainly no different, but you also should have it in writing too. Your employee cannot run from something that's in writing. So they can't say you never told them if you sent them a letter in writing about what happened. So yeah, absolutely. Make sure you understand exactly what's been going on, exactly what performance or conduct you want changed or altered or stopped, and that you put it into writing and you send them a letter. That might mean that you need to give them a meeting and hand it to them face to face. Depends on you, depends on your policy, depends on what you want to achieve, depends on how often it's happened, but certainly get into a letter. We need to terminate an employee. What do we need to include in the termination letter if we need to give them one at all? We always need to give a termination letter. It's actually a legal requirement in the Fair Work Act. Let me just find that quickly for you, Kat. Requirement for notice of termination or payment of lieu. An employer must not terminate an employee's employment unless the employer has given the employee written notice of the day of the termination, which cannot be before the day the notice is given. Okay, so yes, you absolutely have to terminate in writing. What do we need to include in the termination letter? Well, it depends on what's going on with the termination and how you've got around to terminating. For example, if you're terminating within a probationary period or within the first few weeks of employment, it's more likely than not you don't need a reason for termination. However, your employee is probably going to want one. If you're terminating because of conduct or because of some sort of performance issue, then I'm going to hope that that termination is not a surprise to that employee. You should probably contact us if you're going to terminate an employee without actually that employee realising that that's what might happen to them. The termination letter should probably have the reasons why you're terminating them if it's not under the probationary period. But really, you just have to keep it simple. Make sure that the employee knows they're terminated, make sure they know when that termination comes into effect, make sure they know that they're going to be paid certain monies at the time the termination is in effect, and wish them all the best. So, we would like to offer someone a position within our business without handing them an employment contract straight away. Is there a way we can do this? Yeah, look, there is. I think it's possible to give them a letter of offer telling them that the offer is subject to an employment contract which they will receive in due course. The trouble is, it depends how long you wait. If you wait for 2 days after employment starts, then the likelihood is your employee is going to sign that contract and not really care too much. If you wait till 2 years after they start employment, the likelihood is they're not going to want to sign that employment contract, and they have no way to force them to. So, look, I don't think it's an ideal situation. Legally, the preference would be to get them to sign an employment contract before they start. But there are situations where, for instance, you might be a business that's growing really quickly and you haven't got any employment contracts and no time to stop and think about it, and before you know it, you've got 5 or 6 or 10 or 20 employees and none of them have employment contracts and you want them. I think there's a soft glove approach here. You've got to stop and discuss this with your employees, let them know that you're going to start getting employment contracts put together, that it's more likely than not going to change any of their working conditions, but to take a look at that contract, and if they're comfortable, please sign. So yeah, I think if you're going to get them to sign a contract after they've started work, I would think very carefully about the process you're going to take in order to get that signature. Thanks for watching.